Hi, good evening. I'm Kevin Freeman, and it's Candidates Night for 2022, live from the Scarborough Town Hall. And tonight's broadcast is brought to you by the Scarborough Community Chamber. We are joined here tonight by the Scarborough Community Chamber of Commerce President Tanya Beckwith of UCU Credit Union, and she's helping me set up. I'm Kevin Freeman, doing this for yet another year. And I'm joined by Art Dillon from the Chamber of Commerce, who is our timekeeper tonight. We have changed our schedule a little bit. We have typically start off with the Sanitary District Board of Trustees candidates. And on this rainy evening, we are missing one of our candidates. We will make adjustments, as we always have to do in life, right? We're here in person and not on Zoom, though we do have one candidate joining us via Zoom for the town council portion of tonight's program. So we're starting off with the Board of Education, and we have 3 candidates, and these are all uncontested elections. We have one candidate running for the 1-year term formerly held by Leanne Casalonis. Brian Marino, am I pronouncing that correctly? Mayorino? Well, nice to meet you, Brian. Our other races are 2 candidates running for the 3-year terms, 2 seats formerly held by Alicia Giftos and Kristen Turner. We welcome Carolyn Gammon and Freyla Tarpinian. So welcome tonight to Candidates Night. And we'll start right with Brian Mayorino and your opening statement.
Thank you. So my name again is Brian Mayorino. I come to Scarborough with 11 years of teaching experience over the course of the last few years. I have switched into a new career path, and I am now a full-time real estate agent and part-time firefighter. Education has always been a big part of my life. And for me, giving back to the community is something that has always been a priority. It's how I was raised. It's something I did as a child, and it's something that I raised my own children to do. So when I stepped out of education after 11 years, I knew that the school board, wherever I would end up living, would always be of interest to me. And now the opportunity has presented itself. So in terms of goals and what I look forward to as being a part of the board, I very much look forward to the top priority of knowing that we do need a new school. I've been pretty up to date on what's been going on with that, and I do feel that there's a lot of productive momentum going on, which I look forward to being part of with that as well.
Well, welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
Carolyn Gammon, your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Carolyn Gammon, and I originally hail from the county and moved down here. I probably can't say that I've been down here longer than I was up there. But anyway, I've lived down here in Southern Maine since 1990, I believe, and worked in town in Portland at a CPA firm, and then moved along and worked at one of my clients there as their VP of finance. And now I like the word you came up with, a freelance CFO. And so I would love to put my finance skills to work for the town, and especially around the budget season, and helping keep people informed as to, what's in the budget, how the budget's progressing, what are our key priorities, and making sure the information is clear and out there and available for all the constituents, all the townspeople to know and understand. I want to make sure we have clear and concise information out and available. And as Brian said, shepherding the school to its new vision for the K-2, K-3 solution is going to be very, very important. And I want to make sure that we're making the right calls. I think the current board is doing a wonderful job, and just want to see that through to fruition.
Thank you, Carolyn Gammon. And our other candidate is Freyla Tarpinian. Your opening statement.
Thank you, Kevin. When I sent my eldest daughter off to school for the first time, she was little in kindergarten, big backpack, little girl. She headed up into the steps, And I sent her into that building with pretty much all of my hopes and dreams for the future, just like we all send our children into that building. And on the other side of that door, I wanted her to find educators who were caring, who would inspire her to her highest potential. I wanted those educators to be supported by a team who were supported of ed techs, the janitors, the people who drive bus and make our kids' lunches every day. And I wanted that school community to feel supported. I want them further to be wrapped around by a vibrant administration who is innovating and ensuring that they have what they need so that their educators can do their jobs. And I want the community to then wrap around them so that Scarborough can continue to have a vibrant community that supports our schools and continue to provide the highest education possible so every individual child can reach their potential. I'm running for school board so that I can help be a part of that process. My name is Freyla Tarpinian. I currently work as a deputy district attorney. I've worked for the last 20 years in various capacities having to do with children that intersect in the criminal justice and in the civil system. So I'm very experienced in the IEP meetings. I've been to more than I can count. I'm involved with training and educating educators and police officers when it comes to investigating incidents that happen at school. And I think that the start of supporting our kids is ensuring that they have a safe environment that they can learn in so that everybody is able to come and be productive. And that safety goes beyond just physical safety, although that certainly is where we would start. It would include emotional safety and ensuring that the gains or the losses from the last few years can be turned around into gains so that we can meet the children where they are now post-COVID and educators where they are now post-COVID and adapt into the new world. That would include working on the building project, which is, again, there's been momentum and I look forward to working on that project and also continuing to support our students and our educators.
Thank you, Freyla. We'll move right to questions. And I had a few that I made up, but if there are questions from our audience here, I've got a notepad that I can pass to people and they can relay the question over to me. And my first question was, and I'll give you the background of this. In September, I all of a sudden came to the realization that I had been taking one of my kids to school since we moved here to Scarborough in 1999. So I had 3 kids that went through the school system, with my last graduating in 2022 in June, excuse me. And it kind of hit me that for the first time that I've been living in Scarborough, I have no kids in the school system. So in my preparation for tonight, and obviously the new school is the topic. And I was a bit surprised when I saw that the latest is that it will be a K through 3. And I was looking at the school enrollments, and I remember that when my oldest daughter graduated in 2011, we were at 3,000 students in that, and now we're at 2,872. So my question is as you come on board, tell me, how you will address the whole project, the school planning project, which is certainly underway. Brian?
Yep. So there's obviously been a lot that has occurred up to this point. So I don't see myself coming in and trying to change the momentum of what has been going on, but I do feel like I can be a big influence in that. Some of it, the fact that we'd be building a brand new building, and the fact that they're hopefully by the end of the year, we'll either acquire some land or figure out what the direction is in terms of the location. I feel a lot of my real estate background can be valuable there. But I also feel like as a teacher for 11 years, I have been in 3 different schools, and specifically that I have worked in, and each one looked and functioned very differently. And I think the functionality of the school, which it sounds like has already been taken into consideration, is going to be very important from a teacher perspective to really have the best influence and the best impact that they can on our children. Because if it's nice to have a nice building, but if that building isn't set up for the success of the professionals in it, then obviously it creates some limitations. So I do feel like I have some perspective that I'll be able to add some value to that. And I look forward to doing that.
Thank you, Brian. Carolyn Gammon, what would you be bringing to the table as a board member as we move into the further stages of a school project here in Scarborough?
He's got the real estate and I've got the finance. So we got everything covered. Just kidding. But yeah, to build on what Brian was saying, I think I really like what they're doing with bringing the third grade into making a K-3 project. And that will alleviate the overcrowding, for lack of a better word, at the middle school. And so we can alleviate a lot of the pressure there, and that will just make a better experience for all the kids. And so as far as bringing to the project, again, I think it's going to be communication, and it's going to be, a lot of numbers. It's going to be not cheap. And so being able to communicate the value and communicate what we're doing and why we're doing it, I think is going to be very key to shepherding this project through. And so I really hope to add some value there. And again, the board has done a tremendous job in getting to where they are. And so it's time to bring it home and get it done because it needs to be done.
Thank you, Carolyn. Freyla, we have a new school being considered. And what will you bring to the table as a board member as this process continues?
I would bring to the table sort of all my world experience and views, but a lot of the decisions for the beginnings have been made. And so really the key for any new board member is to educate themselves about the process. What has happened so far? What's the work? The decisions that have been made, what are their reasonings for those decisions? Because knowing how carefully this board has considered these decisions and planned out the community forums they've run, they have taken into account a lot of the different concerns, and they have attempted in good faith to bring together all sorts of different community members and different interests to ensure they're not leaving anybody out or missing anything. And so the key is really bringing myself up to speed and then helping out the process where they need at that point. I don't have a finance or real estate background, but I do have a critical eye for public safety. So I'm of a law enforcement background. I'll be ensuring that it's a very high priority to make sure that our kids are safe. Next to that, it would be really working with the members of the committee and then the town council, because once decisions are made, they then have to be put out. And it's about communicating clearly to the public and also working with the town council to ensure that we're able to meet the budgetary requirements of whatever plans that we have, and then making sure the community supports it, because no matter what the school board decides or doesn't decide, we represent our community and we need to make sure we're listening to them and fulfilling what they want done in the community too.
Thanks, Freyla. Carolyn, you're going to have the first crack at our next question, which comes from our audience. And I must say, it's written in very legible cursive. And the question is, how much influence should parents have in changing and influencing the school curriculum?
That is an excellent question. And that is something that is very important to me. I will say it's one of the reasons why I'm running as well. I didn't articulate that earlier. But yeah, there's you watch the news and you hear a lot about control being taken away from parents, and especially just knowledge of what's going on at school with their child. And I think it's very important that parents play a key role in the education of their children, and that they're at the center of everything when it comes to their child. And as far as the curriculum goes, I think, again, I really think it's very important that parents play a role in that. And I know that's part of the education, the board's responsibility, but I also feel like there needs to be more parent input in that as well.
Thank you, Carolyn Gammon. Freyla Tarpinian, again, I'll ask the question, how much influence should parents have in changing and influencing the school curriculum?
I view the relationship between parents and the school personnel as a partnership. I don't think that they're not separate teams. And so it's really important when we send our kids to school, because I'm sending my kids to school in Scarborough, that when they get there, that they're educated to the highest level possible. There's laws and processes that affect all sorts of curriculum decisions. And so I think it's really important to respect the process. It's important to reflect community values and to listen to the community and make sure that concerns are taken seriously and parents are respected, because we are entrusted with their children when they're at school. But it's also important for schools to have the ability and authority to teach children what needs to be done according to school standards, but also, we don't want to meet the minimum thresholds. We want our children to thrive. We want each child to be educated to the highest potential and to give them the tools they need to go on to what's next. And that's not something that is in either school day or after school thing. We need to work together, parents and the schools, or else we're not going to accomplish anything.
Thank you, Freyla. Brian Mayorino, the question again, how much influence should parents have in changing and influencing the school curriculum, excuse me.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like the two other candidates put it very well. As a former teacher, I completely agree that the way education should work is as a partnership. I really like how Freyla put that, because when I was teaching, one of the things that I noticed the most is when parents were involved, usually those children were more successful. Now, obviously, there's different levels of involvement from parents, and I've seen it from both ends of the spectrum. And so I think sometimes that's where the teachers that we have within this great community also sometimes need our support to educate parents that, yes, there is also a line in the sand where we need to also give our teachers the freedom to be able to do their job. But the input that comes from home, as a former teacher, it was always great for me to know how a particular student might learn, because I can already see this with my own kids. My son learns very different from my daughter. And so getting that input and trying to find a way to incorporate that, I might teach, let's say, history, but I might have two different kids. The way that I go about teaching the Revolutionary War could be different to each of those kids. So I think having parents involved and parents sharing that knowledge that they have, because they see their kids day in and day out and they see the true picture of who they are, I really find that critical to the success of just a student as an individual, not even just in the classroom, but outside the classroom.
Thank you, Brian. Freyla, I'm going to have you begin on this next question. And it's one that I don't think there's any set answer to, but as I mentioned, my daughter graduated in 2022, and feeling the effects of what we just went through as a world community, the pandemic and the COVID-19. How do we continue that recovery for the kids that are still coming through, the younger students that are still now just getting back to really, their first normal year in the last 3? Freyla?
I think we have to start by supporting our educators to support our children. So I don't know anybody or any field that hasn't been impacted by the effects of COVID-19. It was tremendously disruptive amongst everybody. I think the particular harm to children was taking them out of school in a variety of different ways for long chunks of time. And that has led to some learning loss that's pretty well established. Some kids were successful during remote learning, but many kids really struggled. And I think the younger the kids were, the more they were struggled, because certainly young kids are not very elementary school age children are not intended to be independent learners. They're in fact trying to learn how to work together as part of their curriculum. So I think the key is ensuring that the children have what they need to support them where they are now. That's going to really drive into the teachers and making sure that educators have what they need to meet the kids' needs and to help them where the gaps have developed. If we support our teachers and our other support staff in our schools to get the tools they need, the time that they need, the class sizes that they need, they will be able to translate that into each and every student much more successfully than I think any other means. That's their job. And if we empower them with the ability to do that by giving them the resources that they need, then they will be able to help our children through this better than anybody else.
Thank you, Freyla Tarpinian. Brian Mayorino, we're coming back to you again. And I'll edit my question a little bit because it really was about the recovery and the impact on students and teachers and staff as we come back from COVID-19. Brian?
Yeah, so in education over the last couple of years, last decade or so, there's been this big movement on SEL, social emotional learning. And again, I think that that's inside and outside the classroom. But I think the question that we had just a second ago about parental involvement really speaks to this, because parents see how their kids have been struggling during COVID. Or how they've thrived. I have also heard the opposite, where some kids did a lot better because maybe that hybrid version allowed them a little more flexibility rather than just sitting in a classroom seat for a consistent, whatever, 45, 60 minutes. Maybe they had more flexibility to get up and move around. So we're learning more about our kids, I think, and what is some of their resiliency that they have in kind of coming back after a difficult time. And if it wasn't a difficult time for them, then we're learning what actually worked for them. And I think that that parental communication needs to make sure that it gets its way to the classroom so that teachers understand from that social, that emotional standpoint, how can I help in the classroom? How can we as board members help those teachers to make sure that kind of the food chain, if you will, from children communicating to their parents, parents communicating to the teachers, and the teachers hopefully communicating up to us. How can we support that chain link effect to make sure that kids feel in the most stable mental and socially successful environment?
Thank you, Brian. Carolyn Gammon, your thoughts on our recovery from COVID-19 and its impact on students, staff, and teachers?
Yes, I think everybody agrees. There's been a large impact on our kids and our teachers and schools. I think for me, it's going to be really important. I know we need to work on the school, getting the new school up and going and getting that process brought through to completion. But I think we really need to focus on making some more gains in this area, whether it's through a committee work or what. I'm not sure what the right solution is, but I do believe there's room for improvement. And what can we do to get our kids back up to where they should be at this point in time? Again, I don't have the magic answer, but I think working together, we can figure that out and strive towards getting there. And I know teachers have the same, I'm sure you appreciate it more than I, about the impact this has had on teachers and having those students, like you said, some thrived, some maybe didn't. And so there's probably a larger disparity in the classroom that the teachers must contend with. So how do we support them and get them what they need? But I do think there's opportunity here for focus and to start implementing some new projects to get our kids back up to where they should be.
Thank you, Carolyn Gammon. Brian Mayorino, we're going to start this round with you. It's a question from our audience. What do you think about banning books?
To me, it's easy. I mean, books have been around for a long, long time. They've influenced me in terms of reading. I think, and maybe I should clarify a little bit. So are you saying books in general within the classroom? Or are you saying just moving to digital? I should clarify
I
that.
would say about, a lot of school districts, you've been seeing it in the news that, and I believe that's the way that it was framed, is what do we feel about books in our school system, and should some be banned or not?
So specific books is what we're talking about. Right. So that's why I wanted to make sure that I clarified that.
No, understood.
So I think it depends. I mean, obviously we want things that are appropriate for kids. I mean, For me, I think it's important for kids to be well-rounded. So what that means obviously is up to us to kind of decide as a community and what we feel like they should have access to. In terms of limiting things like free speech, when we talk about books and talk about particular books that maybe there might be certain communities around the country that don't want their kids exposed to certain things because they feel like it doesn't fit with their particular view on life. I'd like to think Maine is very open. I'd like to think we're open-minded. I'd like to think the school board in Scarborough is open-minded in terms of teaching kids about respect, teaching kids about community and what our values are and sticking to that. So I think without having a particular book in front of me, it's hard to answer like that one book. But I think in general, as long as books have a specific purpose to them, which is positive and has an intention behind them, I see value in that.
Thank you, Brian. Marino, Mayorino. I'm going to stumble over that all night long. That and curriculum. Carolyn Gammon, your thoughts on banning books?
The way I think about, I know the term banning books has some heavy connotations to it. The way I think of it is what is appropriate to be in our classrooms. And there's some literature out there that for my son, I don't think it's appropriate to be in the classroom. It can be at the library, but does it belong in the classroom? The way I think about it is there are some topics that are very heavy, depending on the age of the child. And I'd like to see the schools focus more on ABCs, 1, 2, 3, science, technology, things of that nature, arts. But if I'm getting the gist of the question properly, I do feel there are some books out there that are too heavy for the kids at the ages that they are. And I think we need to be very careful in what we do put in our classrooms and watch out for our children.
Thank you, Carolyn. Freyla Tarpinian, your views on the whole subject of banning books.
Sure. History hasn't treated kind cultures or societies that have censored large swaths of information from any group of people. The materials in our schools go through a vetting process, and there's a process if there's an objection to any of those materials that's written into the school code. So there's a process available to people who have valid concerns, and they're entitled to that process, which I think should be fair and approached with an open mind. But overall, it would be distrustful of trying to hide information from children. It needs to be age appropriate. But my experience, I think the most example I could have is I know that the children go through some material that's related to safeties around their physical body. As a sexual assault, domestic violence prosecutor, I work with children who've been harmed deeply by inappropriate behavior towards them. And so it's important to me that they are given information to protect themselves that's age appropriate to their level. And so, I know that started for my children in kindergarten and first grade. It was age appropriate. It's a validated curriculum and it was adopted. If there was somebody with concerns about that they should be heard. And there's a process to hear them, and that process should be available to anybody who has a concern about the material to ensure that it's age appropriate. But overall, I would be very concerned at the idea of inserting censorship into any part of as a public office, endorsing any type of censorship.
Thank you, Freyla Tarpinian. Carolyn Gammon, you'll be leading off our next topic. I was perusing meeting minutes from the Board of Education, and I saw ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. And Maine apparently is still subscribing to that. And it's a federal mandate for access of higher order thinking skills, multiple measures of equity, resource equity, and evidence-based, sorry, I can't read my own writing here. evidence-based initiatives. And given what we just had for our last question, I'm asking this because it really gets down to how much does the state or federal government control, and how much do we go by local control in the way that our curriculum is developed, in the way that our literature that we use, our teaching methods, how much local control or what, how do you feel the balance should be of local control versus state mandated control in our schools?
That's a very interesting question. I haven't put a ton of thought into it in exactly that way. But I would say, I know there's certain criteria that we have to do.
Right.
And so I don't think there's really an option there. But I think I think there is a lot of openness to how we interpret those rulings or those guidelines, for lack of a better word. And I think that's where hopefully we can get the public's opinion, the town's opinion, and bring that to bear as much as possible. Because I feel like local control is very important, and having the input of the town and the parents is very, very, very important. And so in the areas that we can be flexible with the guidelines, I think that's really important to seek that flexibility and get the local control in place where we can.
Okay.
Does that?
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And but again, I think it's coming up in more often than not about, you know, how much, you know, in our state, do we stay with local control, or, and, you know, mandates are going to always be there for education standards. But what is that balance, Freyla, that how do you view that?
I don't think of it as a balance so much. I think we have to fulfill the federal mandates for the funding. As an attorney, I'm sort of very like legal based. And so I would be very important to me that we comply with federal law and make sure that we don't lose any federal funding. Same with the state mandates. We need to ensure that we comply with all state mandates, and that's one of our charges. But within that charge, I think as a board, our main focus should be really that we are providing education so that every child who attends our schools in Scarborough has access to the best education we can provide that child. And that education is going to be different for different kids because they learn differently. They need different things. But if we ensure that within those mandates and fulfilling the requirements that we have to fulfill for state and federal guidelines and mandates, that within that, we focus our school district on ensuring that we meet children where they are, we help them succeed to the best ability, and we ensure that they are absolutely prepared for the next step, whether that next step is an apprenticeship, it's a college, it's a university, or it's the workforce. Whatever that child wants to and is going to go do next, we want to make sure that they leave with all the tools that they need to be successful in that.
Thank you, Freyla. Brian?
Yeah, so when I think of this question, if I'm understanding it correctly, I think back to being a teacher over a course of a couple different political administrations. A lot of times in education, from a teaching perspective, and I do think that this impacts the students sometimes too, there can be new programs, new ideas that come in with every new administration. And sometimes there happens to be some inconsistencies that happen within the classroom just because of those laws that Freyla had mentioned before. And so from a teacher, I've taught history. Most of those years I taught business as an elective in vocational schools. I've taught Spanish before. So I taught in a couple different curriculum lanes. And, you know, there were certain things that I know I always had to teach. And then there was room similar to what we had heard before, where, you know, maybe you can get creative, where you can still address what's required, but on the same note, you can get creative within that space and maybe do it a little outside the box. My issue with this honestly, even when I was teaching, it was always a frustration of mine, honestly, because there was always constant change as a teacher. And so teachers get into this rhythm of trying to listen to whether it's local, federal, state, what they require and what they ask of them. And consistently it changes over time. And so I've seen more than once where just when you start to get into a rhythm of going through whatever the curriculum is that's asked of you, now you're getting asked to be doing something else the following year. And you're like, wow, I just got into this rhythm. My students were in a good place. And now I have to start to transition some things. So I do think there's a lot of value from us at a local level to try to influence that where we can. But from what Freyla was saying, it's true. We only have so much control and influence. There's only a certain degree to where we can have an impact there.
Right. Thank you, Brian, and thank you all for that question, which it was one that just in doing my research, I was coming up on some subject matter that I myself wasn't fully understanding. Here's one that I do understand, and Freyla Tarpinian, I'm going to ask you to lead off. It'll be our final question, and then we'll prepare for closing statements. How will you, as a Board of Education member, support our workforce of the future, getting our students prepared for the workforce of the future?
This is an exciting question because this is really why I want to be on the Board of Education. I think that the workforce of the future is hard to imagine today, but we're seeing hints of it. So it's about technology, it's about evolving and adapting to new ways of doing things. And COVID really fast forwarded a lot of that with remote work and hybrid situations and the explosion of technology that has just rippled through everyone's lives, including our youngest students. I mean, I've done a Zoom class with a preschooler, which is difficult at best. But I think the important thing is making sure the opportunity with like this building project is making sure that we have a building that supports our students in learning all of the tools and skills that they're going to need in the future. So that's a huge opportunity. And we need to be looking, when we're looking at the places where we do have flexibility in the curriculum and sort of how we are delivering education and how we're supporting our teachers and making sure that they're evolving too to support students where they want to go next. Because the workforce of the future is going to be developed from the passion and the inspiration of what kids learn in school. What do they want to be? And maybe not know that answer when they graduate. Very few 18-year-olds are very firm, and that's okay. As long as each one who graduates is supported in what they want to do next. And again, we need to look at the full range from going straight into the workforce to apprenticeships, vocational schools, hard skills that sometimes get overlooked, as well as kids who want to go on to university and college classes. I mean, we need to support kids wherever they are and whatever they want to do. And that we need to prepare them for that, because that is the workforce for the future. They're going to tell us, and we're going to see what they do with the tools we give them, and they're going to develop those skills as they go.
Thank you, Freyla Tarpinian. Brian Maiorino, your thoughts on how you can best support as a board member, school board member, the supporting students for the workforce of the future.
Yeah, so I've loved this question also. This has really been my lane for a really long time. So when I did teach, 2 of the 3 schools I taught at were CTE schools, but they were high schools. And so one thing I learned while I was there is, one, CTE schools often were underappreciated, and the skills that were learned there were underappreciated. They always had this stigma to them that if you learn a vocation, you were less educated or not as worthy. And the one school that I taught at, which was not a CTE school, actually had vocational programs within it. And it worked really, really well for those students because they were getting what I would consider a really well-rounded education. And during that time, although it was a high school, we also worked during that time to get students from younger grades to start thinking about what they wanted to do in terms of their future. So I don't think that this just needs to be a high school question, because you usually, not that it was, but usually a lot of communities, you see vocation and getting students prepared for the workforce as starting when they get to high school. I don't know why that has to be, right? So I have a daughter who thinks she wants to be a dancer. Well, there are vocational programs to go learn to be a dancer. Can that start at a younger age? Sure, if she wants to really try to do that. I don't know. But you know, I've had students over time that have been very passionate about certain things. And if we can provide them an outlet, whether it be in this new school or trying to find a way just within our community, maybe within the new community center that's being talked about, I think that adds a lot of value, not just to our education system, but to our community as a whole, and really Maine, because when we talk about the future and vocation, we'd love to keep things local, right? Maine, that's one thing I love about living here. We often talk about keep it local. And if you can try to figure out what the demand is within our community, within our state for a need for the workforce, then we can start to incorporate those better within our schools as well.
Thank you, Brian. Carolyn Gammon?
Yes, I think this is a great question as well. So I'm a junior achievement volunteer, and I've volunteered in Scarborough for many years. And what I always find so fascinating when I come in a classroom, and it's usually over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, you come in once a week for about an hour and you teach the curriculum. And I love seeing each student's unique gifting and abilities. And I personally, when the children that are more on the artistic side, because I have zero capability on that side. And so when I see that come out and flourish, and you give them, you know, a project to work on that, you know, you need more of that creativity than I have. It's always so much fun to see that. And what can we do to help, you know, accommodate kids wherever they're at, you know, whatever, you know, if it is vocational, if it is, you know, going off to college and, you know, becoming a lawyer or a doctor, you know, whatever it may be. I think it's really important that we have a focus on kids on all ends of that spectrum and are able to support them and make them as successful as can be. And I love your idea about, you know, using the community centers. There's something, you know, that's in the future, but is there something that we can do there? You know, what programs can we put into place to help foster kids, you know, interests in their abilities? And so I think that's a very exciting topic.
Well, thank you all. We're going to get ready for your closing statements. I've got a little stuff I've got to do, so I'll let you collect your thoughts. We'll be starting with Brian and then move to Carolyn and then to Freyla for the closing statements. But I want to remind our audience that we have 3 candidates running tonight, and they're actually running for 3 separate seats. Brian Maiorino is running for a 1-year term to fill the term of Leanne Casalonis, who resigned because of a new job situation earlier this year. So Brian's running for a 1-year term, and Carolyn Gammon and Freyla Tarpinian are running for the 2 open 3-year seats on the Board of Education as the expiring terms of Alicia Giftos and Kristen Turner. So that's our Board of Education candidates that are all 3 here with us tonight. Now, we have a range of other candidates that are running, and we'll be meeting our town council candidates next. We also have a sanitary district trustee race, and there are 2 open seats. Joseph Carroll is an incumbent, and he's looking to serve another term. And we have 1 declared write-in candidate, Anthony D'Amelio, will be a write-in candidate seeking that second. He's a declared write-in candidate. And that's for Paul Rodriguez is termed out on the board. There are also in Scarborough House District races, and the House districts have changed. House District 124, which is really kind of Pine Point and the Higgins Beach and Black Point area. Sophie Warren, or east of Route 1, I think is how it's marked off. Sophie Warren, the Democrat incumbent running against Lisa Markowski of Scarborough, a Republican candidate. Then we have House District 125, which was the seat formerly held by Chris Cayazzo. Kelly Murphy is the Democratic candidate and Alan Livingston is the Republican candidate. And also House District 126, which was a reshuffled district. There is only one candidate. It's Drew Gatine, a Democrat running unopposed for that seat, which is really the western part of Scarborough and part of Westbrook. And it's an amalgam of a few communities. And finally, the other one on the ballot, Senate District 30, Stacy Brenner, Democrat, running against Tim Thorson to be our state senator. So I've killed a little time. I did want to say that that early voting is now underway in the Town Council Chambers B here at Town Hall. And that runs, I believe, from 8 a.m. to 7, but go on the town website and you can get all the information on the town clerk page on the website. So we are underway. It's all for ballots that in-person voting will be going on until November 8th, when we'll be voting over at the Scarborough High School, as we always do. So with that, we're now ready for closing statements. And I turn first to Brian Mayorino.
Thank you. So although we are all running unopposed, I don't take that lightly. And I really am humbled by the opportunity to end up in this position. I think that it's very important that as a community member that we contribute to our community. I've always very strongly believed that when you come into something, I love the saying that you leave it better off than when you came in. And that is my goal. So I'm ready to contribute, but I'm also ready to listen. I'm ready to learn, and I'm ready to be educated as well. So where can I help? And in the areas that I feel like I can contribute from experience, I will. And if there's something that I don't know, I'm ready and willing to research that as well. That said, part of the reason why I'm running for the 1-year term is because it's always been very important to me that if I do something, I do it to my fullest ability. And I wanted to make sure, just with my busy schedule with real estate, the fire department, having 2 little kids, I wanted to make sure I could handle it. So obviously if this year goes well and I feel comfortable with being able to manage everything, then I would hope to continue on. But for now, I am looking forward to being elected to a 1-year term and serving with my fellow candidates and making a big contribution here in the community.
Thank you, Brian. Carolyn Gammon.
Thank you, Kevin, for being our moderator tonight. It's been a pleasure getting to know you a little bit. But yes, I agree with everything Brian just said. It's you know, coming and serving in such a role is very important, and it's very important to our children, to the teachers, and to the parents in town. And I don't take that lightly. And one thing that's very important to me is to get feedback from people. You know, as I was going around and getting signatures, it was really interesting to listen to the parents and hear what was on their hearts and what's on their minds. And so that's one thing I want to continue those conversations with the various parents and making sure that the school, that we're addressing things that are important to the parents and to our kids. So just going along that line. And then again, I feel very passionately about making up the learning losses since COVID has hit, and what can we do there to get our children back up to speed. That's very important to me. So that's why I'm running. And anybody has any questions, always feel free to reach out to me, and happy to answer anything you may have.
Thank you, Carolyn. And last but not least, Freyla Tarpinian.
Thank you, Kevin. I am so excited to be able to join the school board with the new fellow members. I think one of the challenges is going to be that there's 3 new members joining a board, and it's going to be a board that has got a lot of growing and at learning to do, and we'll be able to do that together, so that we can come together and really focus on what we need to get done. I look forward to really working on that building project. That's clearly the most front and center current ongoing issue the board needs to address. But I don't think we should forget about the really important day-to-day functions of the board, which is making sure that the schools are running, that their students are thriving, that the budget is getting made and passed, and that all the day-to-day functions of the school are being met. And I'm sure there are challenges that are unforeseen that are going to come right down at us. But I believe that my past experience has shown that I'm extremely invested in the community. I go out of my way to get involved with various boards and projects, and I'm hardworking and very energetic. And I look forward to bringing that to the board with my fellow board members to tackle all of the things that come down at us. And so I'm asking for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Scarborough voters, you've got a former educator, a finance expert, and a lawyer. If those aren't qualifications that you need for your Board of Education, I don't know what you need. But thank you all for stepping forward. It was a pleasure to meet you all. And we thank you for running, and we wish you the best in the future. And we will now just take a short little break, and we will move to the town council portion of our program. Again, this is Scarborough Candidates Night, coming to you live on Thursday, October 13th from Scarborough Town Hall. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes. it's October 13th. It's still October 13th. I got a feeling it's really raining outside too. And this is Scarborough Candidates Night coming to you live from the council chambers here at Scarborough Town Hall. I'm Kevin Freeman. I'm your moderator. Again, this year, volunteering for the Scarborough Community Chamber of Commerce, which puts on this event every year. And we're joined tonight by the Scarborough Community Chamber's President, Tanya Beckwith of United University Credit Union, and also, longtime volunteer, just about as long as I've volunteered, probably longer. Art Dillon is here as our timekeeper tonight. And we are now moving to the town council portion of our program. And we have with us in person Karen Shoop, who is running for a 3-year term that was formerly held by Ken Johnson. And joining us via the wonderful Zoom is our incumbent April Scyther, who is gracious enough to join us despite being out of town. So welcome, April.
Thank you, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
And why don't we go right to opening statements, and we'll start with the incumbent, April Scyther.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event. I am coming to you live from Florida. I'm actually at my Uncle Gary Lafano. For those that might know that name, I am Zooming from his den. And my kids are swimming in the pool. So I'm glad that we have the capabilities to do Zoom so that I could be here tonight. I love this event. I love the opportunity to connect and talk with constituents, to hear constituent questions. I think it's a great opportunity for people to find out where candidates stand on certain issues. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. And aside from that, I am running for a 3-year seat. I currently hold a 1-year seat that was created by a vacancy. And I feel like in the last year, as one of the school board members potential candidates just said, it was really a trial run. I do have 4 young kids, and I just wanted to make sure that this was something that time-wise I could commit to. I know that conviction-wise, I'm certainly committed, but it's a lot to manage. And so I feel like I've learned a lot over the last year, and I really look forward to the opportunity to run for a 3-year seat this time.
Well, thank you very much, April Scyther. And now let's meet Karen Shoop.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm really excited to be here tonight. I've lived in Scarborough for 17 years. I have 2 children, 12 and 9 years old. I really care about this community. I had studied government in college. I believe in democracy so much that I started volunteering almost 10 years ago with the zoning board, then on the planning board. I did the charter review. I currently serve on the community services board, and I also am on the school board's building steering committee, which has been really interesting lately. I decided to run when I started to feel over the last couple of years that personally, as a resident, not all my needs were being met by the town. And I was like, if I'm feeling this way, I'm starting to feel like maybe other residents are starting to feel this way. We've gotten more and more involved, trying to see where the discrepancies are, and maybe some of the needs could be met or we could do better. So I'm really excited to join the town council and hit the ground running.
Thank you, Karen. Let's get right to, I think this is more of a discussion about topics around town. And if there are questions that come from the audience, we'll certainly take them. It's a rainy night here in New England. April, I'd like to bring up the first topic that it really is, as I've said to Tanya and to Art Dillon tonight, I don't think we've ever had this topic on any candidates forum, and that's the subject. And I think it's a sad subject to bring up, but the homelessness, the homeless crisis has hit Scarborough. We're not immune to it, and and I think we're not unique by any means. It seems to be happening to a lot of communities. And your thoughts and maybe ideas of how we find an answer or a solution or how do we deal with this emerging homeless situation that's going on in our community?
This is such an important topic. I'm so glad that you brought this up to lead us off, because it's something that we did not necessarily anticipate as a community needing to deal with. And so I think that, I can only speak for myself, but I know that the council had really, when the issue first presented itself, and for those who may not know, exactly what happened, one of our or several of our local area hotels were working in partnerships with people who were placing homeless people in hotel rooms. And so essentially we had hotels that were operating as homeless shelters. And really the only reason this became a council issue, or the main reason it became a council issue, or the way, I shouldn't even say that, the way it came before the council was as a license renewal. And so we typically would renew people's business licenses, and for hotels, we would handle those renewals in June. And it came to our attention, are we really in a position to renew these hotels' business licenses if they're not operating as hotels? And so from a strictly black and white standpoint, I think it became easy to say, well, they're not operating as a hotel. We shouldn't renew their license. That would be one way of curbing the whether or not these homeless individuals are allowed to live in these hotels. And then as we started to work our way through the process, it became obvious to me that this was so much more complex than that. What do we do with the individuals who have been residing in our hotels? Should we evoke the license? And so the council took action to table the measure multiple times. And I think that the best thing we did was we relied on our staff to help us navigate this situation. And we have some of the best here in Scarborough. Our chief of police, our fire chief, the town manager, all working together to arrive at a solution, or at least work towards a solution. And so for us as a council, we were really guided by their best practices and their involvement in this entire process. And so I think, we all learned a lot between June and September. And it was a little disappointing in September when the media reported that the council was voting to evict people from the hotel, the Comfort Inn. That wasn't what the vote was. The vote was, we voted to renew the license, and the hotel owner had voluntarily made the decision to not renew his partnership. And that's beyond the council control, but that doesn't end homelessness. And I think that, anyone who lives in town who perhaps drives Payne Road will notice that homelessness is something that we are going to have to tackle. And unfortunately, it is something that, we're not immune to here in Scarborough. And so one of the things that I hope to see moving forward is this tactical approach in terms of forming committees and getting a lot of stakeholder input. And I think that is the best thing that we can do when we're faced with something that we're not sure exactly what the best approach necessarily is we lean on our staff and our professionals to guide us through, but we really sit down and we have those committee-based meetings to really kind of pull people together so that we can hear all sides before we decide on any of these issues, what the best path forward is. And so I would like to see the town council take the lead on that in terms of making sure that we have a community involvement, aspect and a real committee-based aspect to that approach.
Thank you, April. Karen Shoop.
Thank you. So I actually reached out to a couple town councilors when the Comfort Inn was coming up for renewal for their license. I live in Southern Scarborough. I drive down up and down Route 1 multiple times a day. My parents came to town and they were saying, well, what's going on at the Comfort Inn? Sometimes they'd stay there and we'd swim in the pool. And I was explaining to them what was going on and why the police and the fire had been sitting there for the last hour. A couple of my concerns, generally speaking, and the message that I relayed to the town councilors at the time, my perspective as a resident was that Scarborough is not equipped to handle homelessness. We don't have the social services. We don't have the public safety. We don't have the police. When I'm touring the police public safety building and they're telling me at certain times we only have 3 police officers on duty at certain hours, and they're being called multiple times a day to one facility. As a resident, it concerns me, and it concerns me about the safety of the other residents. Generally speaking, it is a complex issue, as April said, that I do not think Scarborough has quite tackled or figured out how to handle yet.
Thank you, Karen. Karen, I'm going to come back to you with the next question, and that's your thoughts on probably the biggest topic in Scarborough, and that's the growth of Scarborough. Your thoughts on how we handle growth and whether where you stand on growth, period.
Thanks. So I did serve on the Charter Review Committee, which there's going to be a bunch of items on the ballot this November coming from the Charter Review. And it was when I served on the Charter Review that I actually started looking at how big Scarborough really was. And I was sort of surprised at how big of a municipality we actually really are. And, when I started comparing us to other municipalities, I was saying, how come we don't have the same facilities and amenities that other towns have who are the same size as us? I feel like I'm at an advantage because the town just did a survey. And so I feel like I have a manual right in front of me that tells me how residents feel and what they're thinking and what their concerns are. So when we have a survey that's not even a year old or a year old at this point, and over 50% of the people are responding and saying that they're dissatisfied or extremely dissatisfied with the management of the growth in the town, you can't ignore that. And so, I think we can do a better job with what we're doing here. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I watched all the town council meetings and the amendments and the GMO and the exceptions. And, I'm curious to see how this plays out and what the councilors come back with. I'm not against growth, but I think I'm hearing from the residents and what the survey is telling us that the pace of growth is too fast, especially with the single families and the multifamilies. And so, one of the concerns that I have about growth coming from my experience on the planning board also is that I think we can do a better job protecting our natural resources. I think where we live is very special, and we have the largest saltwater marsh in the state, which is important to me. And I think that we need to do a better job at protecting that before we continue to grow.
Thank you, Karen. Shoop. April Scyther. The question is on how do we handle growth? How do we address growth as a town council member? April, are you still with us? All right, we'll work on that.
How's that?
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Sorry, you guys, Zoom.
Yeah, that's it. We deal with it. Were
There
you able to hear our question?
Yes.
Okay, the floor is yours. The subject matter is growth.
Thank you. Number one thing that comes before the council for the year that I've served has been growth. In some iteration or another, that is the number one thing that we talk about. And so, it's really challenging when people say, are you for growth or are you against growth? Because that has so many layers to it. Ultimately, I am for smart growth, and that just sounds like a good soundbite, I think, a lot of times. But what people and what I hope, I will build some confidence around that answer is that we have done a lot of work as a council to control the sprawl that people we're seeing all throughout Scarborough. And so the new GMO is not perfect. We as a council are working our way through how to amend and make it better. But the heart of the GMO is smart growth and making sure that we centralize growth into our high growth areas. And the bottom line is, we're not going to stop development or growth entirely in Scarborough. And so how do we make sure as a council that we are in the driver's seat and that we're not always just responding to the requests of outside forces, whatever those outside forces may be. And so as a council, I want to make sure that we get things, into ordinance so that our ordinances reflect what the values of our citizens are. And so, Karen made a great point about land conservation. We can have smart growth and have ordinances that protect and continue to protect our natural resources. We can grow in a sustainable way where we make sure that our ordinances reflect EV chargers and solar panels, and that buildings be ready for power of the future, as opposed to, necessarily building things, for by 2022 standards. And so there are things that we can do to ready ourselves for growth, because there's just no way to stop it entirely. But that doesn't mean that we can't be proactive about it.
Thank you, April. We're going to stay right with you. Bringing up the subject matter of the marsh and our natural resources. We're sitting here tonight, and I think they said this morning, this storm that we're getting tonight is the largest fall storm that we've had since 1996. And I can remember that storm. I was living in South Portland, and fortunately I was in a hilly section of South Portland because Cache Corner was just flooded out. Climate change. How do we address climate change? What can we do? What can you do as a town councilor and as a town council to help ready our community? Our biggest asset is really our natural resources, and how do we protect that?
Yeah, absolutely. April? Absolutely. And I think this question came up, or, it usually comes up in some form or another. And I think, in the past, counselors have really kind of struggled to nail down exactly how we can, as our municipality, wrap our arms around climate change, because it just feels so big. But I'm starting to see so much progress at the committee level when it comes to real concrete things that we can do here in Scarborough. And it makes me so excited and so proud to be a member of this community, that we have so many dedicated volunteers who serve on committees that are dedicated to sustainability and land conservation. And these people work tirelessly to not only develop ideas about, work that they can do within their own committee, but they also bring about action in the form of ordinance recommendations that make their way through the council. And so it's so important at our municipal level to stay engaged with those committees. And I've said, for every time that people get frustrated that it seems like the council is hearing from a lot of developers, I've said to my, I'm the liaison to Conservation Commission and Sustainability, I should say. I should probably put that. And I've said in meetings, get out in front of the council as often as we hear from developers.
I think that's coming from above. That's the timekeeper from above has said, well, let's move on to our, I'm sorry, you froze again, but why don't we take advantage and we'll move to Karen Shoop with the question was on climate change and how do we balance that, and how can you play a role as a counselor for the town?
Sure. So climate change and where we are located, the rising oceans and tides are something that we battled a lot in the zoning board. And I know that they recently just amended the shorelands ordinance to at least accommodate the residents who are already facing these type of issues. And, when I put a lot of value in the boards. And so I'm going to hook on kind of what April was talking about, because I come from some of those boards, and we have so many educated and knowledgeable residents who serve on these boards. And I really look at the Conservation Commission, because currently serving on the planning board, I do feel like there is a lack of acknowledgement sometimes about climate change or conservation. I'm really excited about I was unaware of statute that creates the Conservation Commission and how they should be actually working in line with the planning board. And that is actually one of the goals that I have, is to really try to implement that and get people who are on the Conservation Commission, because they understand climate change and they understand how to conserve in this changing environment, and have them work directly with the planning board and the town council so we can really preserve our town and protect it.
Thank you, Karen. Karen, I'm coming right back at you, and it looks as though, April, we've got you back, which is great. The second biggest topic in town after growth would be taxes. How, as a town councilor, will you help keep taxes within reason?
That's a great question, Kevin. Thank you. I don't know. I think there's a lot of options out there. When I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking about this subject, and I do know that we just passed that law, which was the property tax stabilization program, which at least guarantees the seniors that their taxes can be frozen. And so I think sometimes when we talk about these improvements and these big capital projects, especially people who are on a fixed income have concerns. I think for me, that's a really big step in the right direction, especially because some of the things that are coming up, I think sometimes folks don't want to vote on stuff because it just seems like their own taxes are going to go up. I think coming down the line, some of the residents have some tough decisions to make about the future of Scarborough and what they want their town to look like. The school is a very big issue. I personally think it's a crisis, and I think it's going to be on the ballot next year. And I think the residents need to decide if this is something that is valuable to our town as a whole, even if you have kids, if you don't have kids, what our reputation is within the town. Maintaining, we obviously want to keep the tax rate low for the current residents, but we also want to provide our residents with a town that they are satisfied in living in. And so we shall see what the school board brings, or with the school building steering committee with the new school. I'm on the community services and rec advisory board, and the community has spoken very loudly that they want a community center, they want a pool. But I think now the decision comes when we all want these, but what are the numbers? We don't know. I think we need to get the numbers, and then the residents really need to decide if this is a priority for them and if they can do it.
Thank you, Karen. April, we're talking about taxes and how to keep them under control, and at the same time provide the services and needs to the community.
Thanks. Karen did a great job with that answer. We're totally aligned on the school piece and people really needing to understand the finances behind that capital improvement and what that's actually going to mean for our taxes. Aside from our capital, improvements, just in terms of the budget cycle, I struggle a little bit with how much emphasis we put on the tax rate. I don't think I'm alone in sometimes thinking that we are compromising in places to kind of bring that tax rate down and keep it under that 3% threshold that we set as a council. But we're doing it at the cost of some long-term planning, which is another thing we hear from residents a lot, is that they would like to see us be better about long-term planning. And it's really hard to do that when we're always kind of trying to find places to cut, because one of the easiest places to reduce any fiscal, any annual budget is, money that we're setting aside for the future. And so, it's really hard to shift people's mindset off from a certain mill rate increase. But I think ultimately, with good communication and a finance committee that is trusted by the community, I do think that we can arrive at a place where people will be able to not only, I mean, we are dedicated as a council right now to keeping that tax rate below 3%. We've had an excellent track record for doing that. But I do think that over the next few years, we're going to have to start to see a shift away from that hardline goal in order to make sure that the services that we have in this town match what people expect to have.
Thank you, April. I'm going to stay right with you for our next question. And it kind of, I've been a board member of the Scarborough Economic Development Corporation, and I'm now a former board member, but helping with the strategic plan. And at last week's SEDCO annual meeting, the number that jumped out at me is that Scarborough is the fourth largest economy in the state of Maine. And, you just don't think that a town that we really have that much economic clout. And how does that play in to the future planning for the community of Scarborough?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always about, hitting that threshold and that goal of having a certain percentage of our tax base be commercial property. And as Karen pointed out at the SEDCO annual meeting, we are right there. We are so close to having that diverse goal met. And so when we talk about growth and we talk about our economic development, I attended the SEDCO annual dinner last week, and I said to Karen as we were leaving, I was so proud to be a member of this community and have all these diverse businesses in this community. People who work so hard, who are so dedicated, who also live in this community and understand the value of their business to our tax base. And so keeping that momentum going, being excited and welcoming to new projects without worrying that they're going to get a huge CEA, or without assuming that somehow that their cost to serve is going to be greater than what we can meet within our residential tax base. We need to really think about and change our mindset. Again, it's just about shifting that mindset a little bit to be more excited about some of these business opportunities and to keep these opportunities coming in our high growth areas.
Thank you, April. Scyther. Karen Shoop, your thoughts on Scarborough's economy?
So you said that Scarborough is the fourth largest economy in the state. Is that correct?
That's what was reported last week
and
at the SEDCO annual meeting.
Hear that, but I'm not. I am all about being local. I use every of my businesses is in Scarborough. My doctor, my eye doctor, my dentist. I use everything in here. So I'm surprised by it, but I'm not surprised by it. I am a big supporter of the local businesses. Art will see me at the buy local events, even though it serves zero purpose for me. I use local services providers. I always like to use local residents for that. I'm surprised that it is the fourth largest economy. I think that's a great place to be. And I think that's great. And I think we should focus on maybe how the residents feel about us being the fourth largest economy. And if they think we should grow more, if we need more commercial. I know right now that the taxes that we're getting from the commercial base are not quite what we were expecting. And so I'm hoping that will be increased. And then we can also meet the needs of the residents and continue to have a thriving economy.
Thank you, Karen. Let's move to the subject, and I'm going to stay with you, Karen. The subject of traffic. It comes in from the west, it comes from the south, it comes from the north, and it's also partly a result of people just in town taking in all these different natural resources and businesses and shuttling their kids to school and back. How do we continue to address the increasing traffic in town?
Sure. So I think, as I mentioned before, I'm currently a member of the planning board, and I didn't realize what I was walking into at my first meeting, but it was actually the November meeting in 2021 where the planning board passed the largest traffic movement plan that the state has ever done. That was actually a very big deal. I felt a little naive, not realizing how important it was, but there was fruition of 2 years of the town, the developer and the state working together to create a plan that is already happening. And I think I see all the comments and I see all the residents' concerns about traffic, and it's actually happening. We are addressing it. There's a plan. It's being implemented. And I know people have seen it happening on Payne Road. A lot of those are safety features and things like that, are getting ready for the development and things like that. The improvements that, the town is going to see and the residents are going to see are really at the high growth areas around the downs, along Route 1, they're already improving the traffic lights. They're going to be adding a lot of safety features, a lot of along Holmes Road and Mussey Road, and they're going to be doing expanding and things like that. Not all the traffic is coming from Scarborough. That is I always hear, well, growth. Route 1 is a lot more busy. It is, but I also hear, but it's not coming from Scarborough. I don't think it matters where it's coming from, but it's coming through Scarborough and we need to acknowledge it. I feel like some folks are saying, oh, well, it's not just Scarborough, and that's the end of the conversation. Scarborough, not Scarborough, everyone is getting bigger. Saco's getting bigger. Buxton is getting bigger. People from Biddeford maybe are driving up through Route 1. I think we are dealing with these issues, but maybe not as quickly, or maybe we aren't getting out there the plan that's already in place. I am optimistic that the traffic movement plan that is in place now will alleviate some of the concerns. I do have concerns about Route 1. I'm curious to see how it plays out. But I think that is a major concern that does tie into growth that needs to be addressed by town council.
April Scyther.
Man, traffic. So I'll tee myself up. We have a Counselor Corner Live. Come talk to John Anderson and I next Thursday, October 20th. And the topic is traffic and transportation. And really the main thing for me is, as Karen said, we have this TMP in place. We know that there's, years of planning that has gone into this. And the struggle has been that we haven't stayed ahead of the problems that we're seeing now. And so when residents feel that crunch, there's going to be frustration, and it's well warranted. I mean, these are things that it's difficult to justify paying for until it's a problem. And so we've kind of set ourselves up to be in the situation now where we do have to play catch up a little bit on some of these improvements. But I am optimistic that the main concerns that people have in town are going to be addressed. And if they're not addressed in this first phase of traffic improvements, then we know we need to do better, because whether or not we continue to grow as a community, I think everyone recognizes that traffic is a problem right now. And so regardless of how much more we grow, we need to do something right now. And so from the minute those first traffic cones went out on Payne Road, I said, oh God, people are going to be upset, right? You can't help it. But hopefully with the traffic light improvements and the widening of the roads and the safety precautions that are being put in place, that we will start to see an improvement. And then we also, have to wait and see what happens with the Gorham Connector. The council approved a proclamation about a year ago supporting that project. And that's beyond, municipal control, but that could also really impact some of Scarborough's, more major thoroughfares too. And so it'll be interesting to see how that impacts traffic in town too.
Thank you, April Scyther. We are coming up on 8 o'clock, and I've got, we'll go with one more question and then we'll move to closing comments. As we're a small crowd here at the town hall, and it's a rainy evening here in New England. Karen, and how do you see your role as a counselor developing? Do you see your role as working primarily within the town limits, or how much interaction should we be having as a town council to the region, to the Southern Maine region? Because it does seem like with traffic, issues spill over, like homelessness it spills over from other communities into ours. How do we work with other communities, or how will you work with other communities in your role as a town councilor?
Sure. Thank you, Kevin. I think when I was on the charter review, I was always trying to see what other communities are doing. So I think some of the issues that we are facing are not new. And I think, when we start to talk to other communities around us or even regionally who have faced them, maybe they have solutions that we haven't thought of, or they've implemented plans that have worked for them, or they've implemented plans that have not worked for them. And so, I think especially when just talking about traffic, I think there is a general benefit, to be talking to Saco. And as April mentioned, that we have the Gorham connector that was coming in, and you can't help but not communicate with the towns around you. That is super important. And you want to make sure that you are friendly with your neighbors and you're getting along with your neighbors. And I think it's important to see what's going on in the region so you can see what works and what doesn't work.
Thank you, Karen. April, how do we work with other communities? What's your role in as a counselor as we look at Southern Maine as a whole?
Yeah, I think that this is super important, and we're lucky enough to be members of GPCOG, which is the Greater Portland Council of Governments. And as a member of that COG, we do have a lot of joint opportunities and committee work that can happen. I know that we are fortunate to have a town manager who is dedicated to having a good relationship with our neighbors, and he attends those meetings. We have a liaison from the council who attends those meetings. And it is really important to be tied into the greater, Southern Maine area in terms of what other towns are doing. We have partnerships, we have, opportunities for savings depending on, salt and plowing needs. There's synergies there that happen naturally when we're good communicators and we're good neighbors. And I think as an individual counselor, it kind of depends on what your committee assignments are, but it is, we are a council that communicates really well with each other. And so if there's something that I'm curious about, I know that I can go to, the counselor that is the GPCOG liaison and say, hey, what are other people saying about homelessness? What is happening at the committee level? I know other counselors are involved with workforce housing committees that, span more than just our municipality. And so I think that this council does a really good job working on those things at the committee level.
Thank you, April. I was thinking of one more question that I was just going to pose to April, and I was wondering about your thoughts on broadband and connectivity. But I think overall, we've really come out quite well with bringing you in from Florida to be able to join tonight's Candidates Night Forum. Overall, I think the connection was pretty good, pretty darn good.
Good, thank you. I appreciate that, and I want to shout out, since you gave me the floor again. I want to shout out to Peter Coleman, who works in the booth there with you in chambers, who always does such a great job making sure that those of us who can't be in the room have the links and know what we need to do. And he's just top notch. So thank you, Peter, for connecting me tonight.
Thanks, April. And I'll let April and Karen gather your thoughts for closing statements, but I did want to I'll take that as an opportunity to thank Scarborough Community Television and Peter Coleman and crew for putting on this event on the technical side, and also the help from Liam Gallagher in making all the connections come forward. Karen Martin at Sedco helped with the planning for this, and Tanya Beckwith and Art Dillon here in the room from the Scarborough Community Chamber, always willing to volunteer and help. It's much more than just me asking the questions. And believe me, I guess I must look at the game of baseball. If you hit 1 for 3, you're batting pretty darn good. And my questions may not always hit, but I just wanted to try to get the subjects that some that we've talked about before, and others that are emerging, and there's more. But That's part of, the journey of your volunteering to serve on the Scarborough Town Council. So as you're getting your thoughts together, I just wanted to go down some of the other things that are going to be on the ballot, and Karen had voiced it and played a role on that committee, and that's the charter amendments that we'll be voting on. There are 7 of them that you're going to find on your ballot. Some are much needed and just haven't been adjusted for a while. Increasing the town councilor's salary from $1,500 to $2,500 to take effect after the November 2024 elections. It probably isn't enough for all the work you guys have to do, but that's not why you're doing it. And also increasing the Board of Education salary from $1,500 to $2,500 to take effect also after the November 2024 elections. There's a change in the annual audit requirement to be completed and delivered to the town council no later than December 30th, with the addition of language or as feasible prior to the budget process. That's the 3rd charter amendment. The 4th is the further amend a vacancies section to indicate that it is up to the discretion of the town council, not the Board of Education, to the option to fill a vacancy for the unexpired term by a special election if the seat becomes vacant within 6 months prior to the next regular town election. Also, amendments to the preparation and submission of the budget, which includes the addition of an itemized statement of all capital assets over $100,000 in value and replacement schedule, the distinction of cash contributions, donations, or gifts to any non-governmental organizations to be delineated in separate line items, and the addition of an itemized statement of specific capital investment recommended for the next 5 years. That's a mouthful. Also, number 6, amendments to nominations and elections section to move the Board of Education election from November to June and adjust the nomination period accordingly. That's one that would have it in line with the ratification of the school budget in June. Also, a final one is to require voter referendum on long-term financial obligations greater than $600,000, a capital improvement or single item purchased or leased for longer than a 5-year term. And I believe it's currently 400,000. So that's raising it up 200,000. The other item on the ballot is the Scarborough Public Library expansion. The following question will be on the ballot. Shall the order entitled Order Authorizing Renovation, Expansion, and Equipping of the Scarborough Public Library, authorizing issuance of up to $12,938,995 in general obligation bonds of the town of Scarborough and appropriating the bond proceeds for the project be approved. It's a yes or no vote that is also on the ballot. So with that being said, I want to thank both of you for joining us tonight. Karen Shoop and April Scyther, the incumbent, running for 3-year terms, 2 seats. So they will both be new council members come ratification of the vote on after November 8th. Balloting is early balloting is taking place at the Scarborough Town Hall right now, early voting, and we'll all be culminating on Tuesday, November 8th with the voting at Scarborough High School. So with that, closing statements, and I will start with April Scyther.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you again to the chamber and to the town staff who help us conduct this evening. I'll keep my closing statements brief and just say that serving the town of Scarborough is my pleasure. I loved serving the school board, and I have loved serving the town council this past year. It keeps my brain busy as a mom of 4 kids. You know, you can only fold so many tiny pieces of laundry, but the important thing is my dedication to this town, and just how much I love and care about the people who live here, guides every single one of my decisions. And so you'll see me sometimes really struggle. And I hope that comes through as sincerity and as, me really thinking, with a lot of compassion, but also with a lot of knowledge, given that, how much the council has in front of us, that my decision-making is in the best interest of the people that I represent. And so I just appreciate the opportunity to do it for 3 more years. So thank you.
Thank you, April, and I'm glad you could join us by Zoom. Thank you
Thank
very much. And travel safely.
Thank you.
Karen Shoop?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to everyone who puts this on. I've always watched and tuned in, so it's exciting to be here on the other side this evening. I feel like I've conveyed that I am committed to this community. I have a track record of service and skills that is needed to serve on the town council. Now, I want to focus on the needs of the current residents, and I want to develop a strong capital improvement plan, and I would like to preserve our natural resources even better than we are today. I am looking forward to serving on the town council. I've enjoyed my conversations with the current town councilors and the residents, and I'm looking forward to serving them. I hope to have your vote on November 8th. If any residents has further questions, I actually have a Facebook page, Karen Shoop for Scarborough Town Council, or you can always reach out with me any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen Shoop, and good luck. And it was a pleasure meeting you, and it's always a pleasure to talk with you, April Scyther, as well. That's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And this thing will be run on continuous loop on cable access television channel 3 and also on YouTube. Scarborough Public Meetings, I believe, is where it will reside right through Election Day. So good night, everybody, and make sure you get out and vote on November 8th. Good night.